and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about "'Tis the season of manufactured discontent" and how to navigate this time of the year where the messages that you are not enough, that you are not good enough, that you're not doing enough, that you don't have enough, that you haven't done enough all year, and how are you going to set yourself up to become your better, higher, more spiritual, more healed, enlightened version of yourself next year, is just louder than ever, right? And the idea that we are entering into this time of year, which biologically, and if we were to like actually be connected with our humanity, would be about slowing down and taking time and being gentle on ourselves. And instead, we are in a reverse trend. We're taught to do the exact opposite of that. And again, how to navigate this time of year without getting totally sucked up by it so that we don't end up with that massive hangover in February and all the pain that comes with that. And then quickly before that, I am going to give you a little bit of a health update on me because I've been getting some questions and I just want to clear the air. And also because I feel like it actually goes in with what I'm trying to talk about today. Okay, so anyone who's followed me for any amount of time has probably noticed that like my weight has fluctuated a lot over the last 10 years of me being on YouTube and on Instagram and all of these things, and that recently I have been looking worse than I have for a while. And I want to again say that I know that this is hard to understand, but I am chronically ill and I am not perfect, and my health is not perfect, and it has never been perfect. I am not one of these people who was well and then did something to myself and then got sick. And I've talked about this in the past, but I know people are new or people forget or whatever, because chronic illness, I think, is something that is just still very, very stigmatized and very poorly understood in our culture today. And so to understand that I did not do this to myself, but rather that I was born sick, I know is a hard thing for a lot of people. And for my entire childhood, I was sick. Okay? I was doubled over in pain with stomach aches. I was allergic to everything. I had rashes, I had eczema, I had ear infections, I was constantly throwing up. Like I was very, very sick. And then getting into puberty, it got so much worse. And on top of that, my caregivers neglected me because they did not understand what was going on. There was very little understanding of what was going on with me in the medical world at the time. And then combine that with the fact that I'm autistic, I'm hypermobile. I went for a very, very, very long time not being diagnosed with the things that I have. And so when I got into my teenage years, I started to change my diet and do all these different things because I was trying to heal myself. So first things first, right? I wasn't well, and then I got into dieting and I like ruined my own health. I was sick, and the reason I got into dieting was because I was sick. The reason that I got into changing my lifestyle was because I was sick. And so this was not caused by that. It was the opposite, okay? And then again, I was deeply traumatized mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and I was gaslit and neglected and undiagnosed and untreated, and everything got worse for many, many years. And then combine that with the fact that I was trying to get myself out of my home situation, which was very abusive. I didn't have a degree, I didn't have money to go to school. I had to work my way out as a chronically ill person who didn't even really know that I was chronically ill. Because that's the other thing, right? Like when you are chronically ill and have been chronically ill for your entire life, you have physical symptoms of pain and things not working that are normal to you. And I didn't know that a lot of the things that I was experiencing were even part of my illness. So like trying to figure out that I was even sick, and especially being gaslit and told that it was all in my head and all of these things for so many years, was really, really challenging. And it took me many, many years. And this self-love path was actually the thing that helped me to start to actually understand that I wasn't just lazy and incapable and not as good as everyone else, but that I was like sick and that this was real. So for the last several years, I've been working with doctors who have been able to actually understand me. I've been getting some test results that have given me the capacity to actually see that, like, yeah, no, this isn't in my head. I have mast cell activation syndrome. I have gastritis. I have gastroparesis, gastritis sometimes. I have hypermobility, I have autism, I have all of these problems, gut infections that have been there for my entire life. Like, I have never been well. And again, I have had a lot of things that I have been treating myself and managing myself and doing a pretty good job of doing, but they're still there, and it's still a huge part of my life every single day. And long story short, for the last 6 months, I've been on a medication supervised by a doctor that has been mitigating a lot of my symptoms. Unfortunately, it caused weight loss, and we tried to do everything that we could to mitigate that effect, and we could not. So we have decided that it is better for me to have the symptoms and to go off the medication and to hopefully regain the weight. So that is what has happened over the last 6 months. And again, I don't talk a lot about my health on this channel, and I don't talk a lot about being chronically ill here because it is not my platform, and because I don't want this channel to be about that. I don't want it to be about me. I don't want it to be about platforming me as some sort of guru or pinnacle or and it's not a vlog. I'm not here to vlog my life. I'm not here to share intimate details of what's going on with me behind the scenes. So I understand that sometimes we can look at me and think she must just be starving herself, because that's all we can conceptualize when we see an underweight person. And I get it, but that's not my story. That's not where I'm coming from. And I totally understand that this is another big thing, is that, like, in our culture, eating disorders are a real huge problem, and they claim lives. And oftentimes people who have eating disorders are deeply, deeply, deeply shamed and blamed and guilted and seen as selfish, evil, horrible people. And then they turn around and they project that onto other people that they see. And this is a huge problem because, again, eating disorders being a part of our culture is a reflection of our unhealthy culture. It's not a reflection of a selfish, stupid, horrible individual who's just deciding to starve themselves to be a horrible person. It's much, much deeper than that, and it comes from pain, and it comes from, again, our systems of just really, really, really unhealthy ways of seeing ourselves and shaming ourselves and blaming ourselves. So again, and also this ties into wellness culture, right? Like, I have been shamed and blamed and guilted for how my body looks for the entire time that I've been in this public space. And the fact that it is still seen as okay and reasonable that we speak to each other like, you are disgusting, you just have an eating disorder, you don't know anything because clearly you're just suffering with an eating disorder and everything that you're saying is a lie because you couldn't have anything figured out because you're obviously just sick. It's like, yeah, I'm sick. I've been sick my whole life, and I don't think that could mean that I don't know anything. And again, right, like, this culture that we live in of hyper perfectionism, and literally, if you don't look like you have the perfect life, you then don't deserve to be able to say anything, or you could not possibly have anything of value to offer anyone else, is a huge part of our not enough culture. And it's a huge problem that I feel like I am working to try to be here and show up and say, like, look, I'm not perfect. I'm very deeply not perfect. I will never have perfect health. I will probably never have perfect health. You are going to witness my body change up and down and all around for the rest of the time that I'm here on the platforms that I'm on, because I don't have perfect control over it. I don't know everything that's wrong with me. We don't have solutions to everything that's wrong with me. It's not straightforward. If I could just change my diet and be healthy, I would have by now, because you have no idea how much I have done since I have been for the last 20 years of trying things and changing things and doing things that, like, if that were the answer, I would have found it by now. And I guarantee you that. And again, like, you don't know what's going on in my life, and that's because I don't share it, and I don't share it for a reason, and I'm never going to share it because it's nobody else's business. And it's not what I'm doing here. But again, we live in a culture that says if you are not perfect, you are not good enough. And so that's why I'm trying to come here and say, like, look, I'm being an example of this self-love path that I'm talking about by saying I am deeply imperfect. I am not the pinnacle of health, and I never will be. And that does not mean that I don't know some things and that I haven't had some things figured out. And so I stay in my lane. I talk about the things that I have figured out. And that's part of being a responsible teacher, is that you know what you have to offer, and you offer that. And you completely validate and acknowledge and recognize that I'm not a fully formed, completely aware human being who knows absolutely everything. So on the days when I look tired, and on the days when I look like death, and on the days when I look really sick, it's because I am. I absolutely am. Being chronically ill is awful, and I would never wish this on anybody. And so, but that doesn't mean that I have nothing to offer and that I have no understanding and no wisdom. And I'm not going to let the judgment of other people shut me down, right? Because that would be being hypocritical to my message. Okay, so there's that part of it. And there's also the whole, so now this is getting into our topic today of manufactured discontent and how we are all so driven into it, okay? Which is, in our wellness culture today, our wellness, spirituality, personal growth world, we are continually sold the message that if we do everything perfectly, we can have a perfect life. We can have a perfect existence, that everyone has access to perfect health and perfect mental health and perfect financial health and perfect relational health. And that if you don't have these things, it's because you are a fraud, and you are a failure, and you are bad, and you are not good enough, and you are not worthy of love, and you are not worthy of whatever. And this is a massive problem. Because in real reality, in real, true, lived reality, we do not have perfect control over our lives. None of us do. There are some of us who are born able-bodied, and it is easier for us to be healthy than others. There are some of us who are born into situations of access, wealth, and privilege that make it so that we can make empowering choices in our lives, and those good choices have massive payoffs. There are people who are born into bodies that are chronically ill, and they will never have perfect health. And the impact that that has on us cannot be understated, and it is often very difficult to understand for people who are able-bodied, because you can just go on with your day and live like a normal person. And I literally have, like, for just talking about myself, I have organs that don't work, like organs that do not do what they are supposed to do. I have genes that make it so that I don't produce certain enzymes the way they're supposed to be produced, so I am allergic to foods that are normal, healthy foods. And just the amount of effort you have to put in to keeping yourself alive and staying consistent is double the amount of effort that a normal person can just roll out of bed and have a body that works and then just go on with their day. Right? So, like, this whole idea that we all have the same 24 hours in a day, it's like a chronically ill person does not have the same 24 hours in a day as a non-chronically ill person. A person who was born into poverty does not have the same 24 hours in a day that someone who was born into relative safety and relative access had. A person who was mentally, emotionally, and spiritually abused their whole childhood, and how that affects our minds, and how that affects the way that we see things, and how that affects the way that we are able to do what we can do in a day. The anxiety and the depression and all the things that causes, not being able to sleep, and how much that hinders your capacity to do what you need to do in the world, does not have the same 24 hours in a day as someone who is loved and supported and has a regulated nervous system on a regular basis. We are not all the same, and not all of us have access to the same choices. And even if we do, not all of us are going to get the same results from those choices that other people are. Right? Like my husband, who is very able-bodied and always has been, can make a slight little tweak to his diet and see massive results in his health. I can make a massive change to what I'm doing and see nothing because my body doesn't work. You see? And so when we start to understand and unpack that a huge part of the reason so many of us feel like we're not good enough and feel like we're not doing enough and feel like we're inadequate is because we're comparing ourselves to people who are saying, just get up at 4 a.m. and write your book before you go to work and you will become a success. We are comparing, right, like a single mom with 4 kids who has to work 4 jobs because she never got a chance to go to school, and all of those, like with all of those jobs, she's barely making ends meet, and then she's trying to raise her children, is not going to get the same results as getting up at 4 a.m. as the woman who has a husband who goes to work every day and brings home $1 million salary, and she can afford to fail in her business over and over and over and over again because she has that safety net. It's not the same thing. And yet we live in a culture where we're like shamed, blamed, and guilted if you're not climbing the corporate ladder, if you're not climbing the ladder of our society. And this is a massive problem. This is a huge part of the manufactured discontent that is constantly spewed out at us. And again, the wellness world has created this idea, especially with health, that we all have access to perfect health at any time. And that if any of us don't have it, we don't have it because we're making bad choices. And this often comes across as an empowering message, right? And this is what's being pumped out at us this time of year more than any other time of year. You didn't have a good year last year? It's because of all of your bad choices. You want to have a better year next year? It's okay. Buy my program, buy my healing thing, come on my diet, do this perfect thing, and you're going to have a better year next year. I can guarantee that if you just start making different, better choices, everything in your life can be fixed, because it all boils down to you having failed to make the right choices. And this is a message that a lot of us, on some level, we want to hear. Okay? Part of the reason it's so popular, part of the reason it gets spread so much, is because to believe that we have perfect control over our lives if we just make all the right choices is a very comforting thing to believe. First and foremost, we have to understand that in our own human psychology and in our own way of just like operating and living in the world, to believe that we have perfect control, to believe that we can create a perfect life where nothing ever hurts again, where we're never sick again, where we're always rich and wealthy, where we're always conventionally attractive, where we never have negative emotions again, where our relationships are perfect, and that comes because we just made all the right choices, Of course we want to believe that message, right? And this is why so many spirituality, self-help, and personal growth gurus are gabillionaires. Because selling people what they want to hear is not difficult. It is incredibly easy to tell people what they want to hear and to rake in the dollars. Because again, when we oversimplify life to the idea that we all just need to make better choices, we can make anything a spiritual concept that is not a spiritual concept. We can turn anything into this idea of personal empowerment when it is actually not personal empowerment. Selling the truth that we do not have perfect control. What I'm trying to sell. We do not have perfect control. I am not a perfect teacher who's completely enlightened, who has absolutely everything figured out, perfect health, perfect relationship, perfect money, perfect everything. But rather, I'm a human being who came from a long, long history of trauma, abuse, neglect, fighting for myself, having to be responsible for things that were way outside of my jurisdiction, things I have never talked about and never will, parts of my life I will never share, right? Running a business, moving across the country moving out of the country that I was born in because I literally couldn't survive there. All of these things. I am not a perfect human being. But I have made my life better. Everything in my life continues to improve. And it improves partially because of the choices that I'm making. And that is the stuff that I share. How can we make choices? What are the choices we can make that do help us improve our lives? Because here's the thing. There is always nuance and complexity in actual, real reality. And this is not a popular thing to sell. And this is why I don't think the self-love path will ever be a New York Times bestseller. Because it's not simple. It's not something you post on a Pinterest board. It's in real reality. Yes, there are choices we can make. Yes, there are things we can do. Yes, we all have personal power to make choices and take responsibility for ourselves and do what we can do to make our lives better for ourselves. And that's different for all of us, right? This is why I don't stand up here and say, this is the way we should all eat, or this is the way we should all live, or this is how we all get out of the matrix, because it's different for all of us. Rather, each one of us are going to have to figure out where we are in reality, where we are in life, what our values are, and what choices are available to us to make, to shift and change and grow. And we also need tools and spiritual teachings and self-help work and community and love and access to safety within the things that we can't control. We need both of these things. We need, just as much as we need information on the choices we can make to make things better, we need information and tools and resources to help us navigate and manage the things that we cannot change and that we cannot control right now, or maybe ever. Because this is an equal reality that the health and the wellness and the spirituality communities never want to admit exist. They go and they say that it's a victim mindset to say that you can have problems that you can't fix. They victim blame and victim shame. They tell people again, You are in the situation you're in purely because of your bad choices. And it's okay for us to judge one another, to literally look at someone and say, you're not perfect. I can see this flaw in you in this way. And because of that, I judge you as a incomplete, not enough, stupid person who's making bad choices. When we have no idea about their lives, we have no idea about the challenges they face, we have no idea about what's actually going on in their lives. But we have been indoctrinated, so deeply indoctrinated, into this hyper-individualistic mindset that teaches us that every man has perfect control over their own reality, and if anyone suffers, they're suffering because of their own fault. That we completely neglect this whole other side of reality. And it is robbing us of our humanity. It is robbing us of our compassion for ourselves. It's robbing us of our compassion for other people. It robs us of our capacity to process the pain and the trauma that we have been through. It literally leads us to gaslighting ourselves about our own stories. It leads us into staying in situations of abuse and harm. It leads us to, again, being completely critical and judgmental of everyone we see, instead of having any level of awareness that other people might be struggling with things that they don't have control over, that they didn't choose, that they didn't put themselves in. And it's a huge part of the reason we suffer so much as human beings in this life in ways that we absolutely do not have to. It's part of the reason we have such lack of community and lack of connection, and we all feel so alone and isolated and like we're not good enough. Because culture, again, is continually telling us that perfection is the expectation, that it's the baseline for being able to be respected or loved or seen as a valuable human being. And this is by design. We need to realize that the way that this causes us to say horrible things to people that we don't know on the internet, and to think that that's justified and okay, the way that this causes us to shut ourselves down and to not share and to not be in connection and to be ashamed, to blame ourselves for things, the way that this drives us into a perpetual state of shutdown and fear, self-rejection, rejection of others, is incredibly good for the system. It is not good for us. These ways of thinking and these ways of acting, again, make it so that we continually feel like we suck. We're not doing good enough. We're not making the right choices. We are making all the bad choices, right? Like literally the fact that people continually come to me and believe that their self-sabotage, their coping mechanisms, the ways that they harm themselves and others are a result of a character flaw. That they see themselves as having had a perfect life and entering their adulthood with all the resources and all the stability and all the awareness and complete perfection, and then just having chosen to fuck their lives up. And then we start looking into, okay, well, what happened in your childhood? What happened as you were being raised? Did you have your needs met? No. Were you abused in any way? Yeah, a lot of the time people were. Manipulated? Were they neglected? Were they in circumstances where they were like literally physically unsafe? Were they actually taught certain things and given information and access and tools? Where they demonstrated healthy behavior, healthy relationships, healthy ways of communication? And the answer, like, no, 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 no. And yet we still think, I'm just shitty. It's absolutely insane in the sense that it's completely out of alignment with real reality. But it's what we're all trained to believe about ourselves. And so then we all walk around with all this shame and guilt and blame as though we should all be perfect, even though none of us were given the resources or the foundation or the safety to have grown into that. And then we walk around and we project that judgment and that shame and that guilt onto everyone around us. And it's societally acceptable to do that. We are literally crabs in the bucket of each other at constant battle, warring with our own shame and guilt that we then project onto everyone around us. And we need to realize how much this distracts us from being able to see the systems for how they function and how they're harming us. It's a part of the way we are manipulated into participating in a system that is deeply, deeply unfair, that is deeply, deeply inequitable, that is harmful. Okay? Systems of work where people literally, again, can put in a full day's work and not have a living wage. Systems where governments pour millions and billions of dollars into war, but don't have the funds to provide healthcare. Systems where CEOs and owners of the means of production buy their 4th, 5th, 6th yacht, while their workers are legally blocked from unionizing. We don't stand up against it. We don't look at it. We don't see it because we're too busy hating, shaming, and blaming ourselves. And when we're not hating, blaming, and shaming ourselves, we're doing it to other people. We're so busy pecking order each other that we're not seeing how we are being manipulated. And so this time of year more than ever, it's turned up to 1,000,000. This time of year more than ever, we are all being bombarded with messages of how deeply not good enough we are, especially in the health, wellness, and spirituality world. Okay, I don't think it's a coincidence that I'm getting extra hate messages right now at this time of year. Because the shame, blame, and guilt that's in our culture is being turned up to 1,000,000,000 right now. So there's going to be way more projection of it. There's going to be way more. Well, you're not good enough either. You're terrible. You're horrible. You're failing in this way. Because we're all being told that we are. Because we're all being reminded of our flaws and our failures and how we didn't live up to the expectation this year. And we got to off-gas that in some way because we don't have any actual tools to healthfully process that. Unless you're in the mystery school, right? Unless you're on the self-love path and you know that this is bullshit. And it's a manipulation. And it's a lie. And this is the problem with our culture today. This is why we are stuck and making very little progress towards an actually better, more sustainable way of living in our society. Because we are stuck in blame, shame, and guilt. And this idea that all of us can just make better choices. And if the individual just makes better choices, this is the solution to all pain and all problem. It is not. It's part of the solution. It's absolutely part of what's going to make things better. But part of making those better choices is making better choices about how we interact with ourselves and how we interact with others. Part of getting through this season where we don't get sucked into this mess is starting with this understanding that if anything we are doing is rooted in shame, blame, and guilt, it's out of alignment with reality. This is the foundational concept of the self-love path. And the self-love path is really just a path of let's connect with how reality actually is. Like what is actually real and what is actually true in real reality. And in real reality, as hard as this might be to believe, everybody that you know, including yourself, is doing the best they can with what they have. We are all doing the best we can with what we have. Now, some people are causing more harm than others. And we've talked a lot about this on the channel. So this doesn't mean that we say, well, my abuser is doing the best they can with what they have, so I stay in this abusive relationship. That's not what we're saying. We start with the awareness that everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. With ourselves. Okay? And how we treat ourselves is going to be slightly different than how we treat other people with this understanding. And we need to understand that. The kind of compassion that we are going to have for ourselves is going to be different than the kind of compassion we have for others. And we learn these boundaries as we walk this path. But starting with understanding that you have a good reason for being where you are, for doing what you do, for believing what you believe, for having all your coping, numbing, self-sabotaging ways of being. That you're not just making a bad choice because you got into adulthood and decided to fuck your life up. You are not flawed. You are not broken. You are doing what makes most sense to you based on the conditions you were born into, based on what you were taught and modeled, based on what was available to you, based on your natural personality. Many factors you had no control over. We need to start there. And if any of your spirituality, self-help, and personal growth material doesn't start there, be cautious of it. Okay, that's my first tip for if you're going to interact with the wellness, self-help, spirituality world this time of year. If any of it is starting from the fundamental understanding that you're just choosing to fuck your life up, or that there's something fundamentally broken about you, you have a broken brain, you're just making bad relationship choices, you're just broken and shameful and bad because you're depressed or anxious or have whatever you have. This is manufactured discontent. Every single time. So you got to be careful with shit like that. Not saying that there might not be some seeds of truth in it, that there might not be some helpful elements to it, but we need to understand that it's starting from a fundamental place of misunderstanding reality. So the degree to which it's going to give you real tools is based on a precarious foundation. Second thing, anything that tells you that you have perfect control over your reality if you just make good and better choices. Okay, so not something that says good and better choices can improve your life. Not something that says we absolutely all have choices we can make that will have an impact. That it's different for all of us, that we all come from different circumstances, that we're all in different circumstances, we all have different histories, so the choices we have access to and the effects of those choices are going to be different for all of us. When they don't start with that understanding, when it's perfection is available to all of us, if you just make the right choices, this is universal. Again, it's out of alignment with reality. It is manufactured discontent. It's going to drive you into shame and guilt about yourself, and it's going to drive you into shame and guilt about other people. And we need to be cautious of it. It's very attractive. We might want to hear that message. We might want to believe that it's true, but it is not. So we have to go in with a sober mind and understand that anything that says perfect and complete control is available if you just make the right individual choices. We have to go in understanding that is not true. Anything that denies that we are going to need tools to help us process painful shit we didn't choose, we don't have control over, we can't always avoid. Anything that denies that that's a reality and doesn't provide any tools for that is, again, at best, a half-truth. At best, it's a half-truth, right? Again, I'm all for personal empowerment. I literally am here, and compared to the people who have all the things that I have, I am doing much better than most people. I have way more mobility, way more capacity than most people who have, when I compare myself to others who are in my situation. I have made good choices that have helped me. But when I compare myself to able-bodied people, I am not anywhere near that. So and again, I am someone who was born into a body that does not work. From the very beginning of my life, my organs did not work. My enzymes did not work. Part of this is literally genetic. It went undiagnosed for years. I was unbelieved and I was gaslit. And now I'm finally getting tests and I'm finally getting results and being, validated. But so much damage was done purely because no one believed me and no one could help me. I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't been neglected. And yet, right? So I didn't choose this. I did not put myself into this situation. But it has had a massive impact on what I have been able to do, what I've been able to accomplish, the kind of person I've been. And that's sad. And that makes me angry sometimes. And that makes me feel very, very lonely and very, very isolated. It means that people attack me. It means that people judge me. It harms my business. And the thing is, I have tools for dealing with that grief and that sadness and that stuff that I have no control over. That's a big part of the self-love path, is real tools for dealing with the real shit of life, instead of pretending that everything can be fine all the time, because it can't. And so if your spirituality and self-help and personal growth contains nothing of that, gives you no tools for working with the stuff you don't have control over, that you didn't choose, the circumstances that you are in, that you never would have chosen, that you never would have put yourself in, that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy, that have had a massive impact on the way that you've been able to live your life. It's not spirituality. It's not self-help. It's denial of reality. It's shame, blame, and guilt dressed up as empowerment. And we need to be aware of that. If your goal setting stuff and who you're going to be next year isn't rooted in what are my values, what's actually important to me, what matters to me as a human acknowledging my humanity, a human who acknowledges that community and connection and safety are more important than luxury and wealth and finding my purpose and manifesting abundance and all of this shit. If it's not based on that, it's probably not going to help you. It's just more of the system, perpetuating more and more of the system, that you need more and you're constantly not enough, and that wealth, luxury, and more individualism is the answer. And it is not. It's separating us from our humanity. It's separating us from what we actually want and what we actually need, which is genuine connection with ourselves and genuine connection with other people. And we are literally taught to fear that. Because again, we're taught to believe that any imperfection, any lack of being exactly perfect, any vulnerability is a flaw, is a failing. So we hide it from one another. We shame it and blame it and guilt it in everyone. And so no one can have a connection with anybody because we all have that stuff. Literally every person that you know, right? Like that cheesy thing. Everyone is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And why? Why do you know nothing about it? Because it's not safe to expose. And yet, the thing we need the most is to expose it. And to have other humans validate and love and support us through it. We need to learn how to have sympathy and compassion for one another, just as much as we need to learn to have it for ourselves. And we are trained in the opposite, right? Which then isolates us, which makes us feel more and more alone. It makes us less connected to one another. And then what? And then we are what? More dependent on the system. It is by design that we are roped into this idea that it is okay to shame, blame, and guilt each other, to look for perfection in each other, and if we don't see it, to attack one another, to concern troll, and to believe that that's actually being concerning and kind when it absolutely isn't, to discredit people immediately just based on them not being perfectly perfect, to pedestalize people, to see people as being perfect, to put people on our vision boards. All of this is a manipulation so that we never actually connect with one another. So then we can be sold that the answer to the aching hole we all have, which comes from lack of connection, lack of community, lack of real resources for working through the real tough stuff of life. We can be convinced that what is going to fill that hole is more consumption and more production. More isolation. More trying to perfect ourselves. Just buy the next spiritual mastermind, join that MLM, do this next thing. It's destroying us. It's causing us to destroy one another. And we're all little soldiers who are perpetuating this system that's walking all of us off of a ledge every single day. And we think it's helping us, right? We're trying so hard to fit in and to do what the system tells us to do. And we do it innocently. It's completely innocent that we all do it. Because at the end of the day, we're doing it because we think if I do this, I'm finally going to be seen. I'm finally going to be loved. I'm finally going to get that love and that validation and that support that I've always wanted and never gotten. And again, the system keeps promising it, right? If you perfect yourself, if you get there, you will be seen, you will be loved, then everyone will love you. You will have safety. That's why we're doing it. It's just that we're not seeing that like that it's an impossible, it's a carrot on the end of the stick, it's impossible. That by doing the very thing the system tells us never to do, we will get what we actually want. To embrace and to accept and to love ourselves as we are, and to start to embrace and love and accept others as they are, to a reasonable degree. Again, remember, this doesn't mean we tolerate abuse. This doesn't mean we stay in situations where we're being continually harmed. And we have to understand, right, that we are living in a world where most people are just traumatized and they are not able to do healthy communication. They're not able to be perfect supports. They're not able to be healthy friends. And so we have to walk that balance of being open and vulnerable where we can and finding the people who are safe enough, while also saying there are definitely people out there we can't be vulnerable with and we're not going to show ourselves to because they can't handle it. They're not ready. But again, the more we do this work on ourselves, the more we make our own self a safe place. We demonstrate that to others. We make it more possible for others to do by being the way showers. That's why I believe this path is just, it's so important for all of us. Right? I used to have so much shame and guilt about my health. And now it's just like, yeah, no, I'll admit it. I'm sick. I've been sick my whole life. I'm always going to be sick. I'm never going to be perfect. And you want to judge me for that? You want to not believe me? You want to just think it's an eating disorder? Go ahead. That's fine. Because I'm not embarrassed. And I'm not ashamed of myself. I know I'm doing the best that I can. I know I didn't choose this. I would never have done this to myself. I know how hard I work every single day to try to make it better and to show up for you guys and to keep doing what I'm doing even though I'm not perfect. Because no one gets to take that away from me. And no one gets to take that away from you because you're not perfect. You're not doing everything right. You have pain that you can't control. You have things that you've gone through that you would never have chosen, and you are still worthy of love. You are still good enough. You still know the things you do know. If anyone out there appreciates my teachings, you should be glad I've been chronically ill my whole life because that's part of how I know what I know. If I had been born well, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be a dancer. This work, none of this would exist if I hadn't been sick. So there's that. None of us are in complete control. None of us are perfect. And we are all deserving of fundamental respect and love and humanity and connection. So as you navigate this season, start with your humanity. You are already good enough. the messages that you failed, or that you're just not trying hard enough, or that you're just not making the right choices are wrong. Do you have personal power? Are there choices you can make? Are there things that you can do to make your life better? Absolutely. But none of that erases that you are worthy of love and compassion and support and validation for who and what you are right here, right now. I want you to take stock of the situations that you're in that you didn't choose. The circumstances of your life that you didn't put in yourself. To be actually honest with yourself about the resources and tools that you had available to you. And then to look at where you are and to say, it makes sense. I'm not just shitty and broken and making bad choices and not good enough, and I need to fix my broken brain. I just need to manifest. I just have a bad mindset. You believe what you believe and you think what you think based on the things that you've been through, based on your experience. If you look at where it came from, it's always going to make sense. So any spirituality, self-help, personal growth that doesn't start with that, helping you understand why you are the way you are and the fact that you should have no shame about it, be careful. If it's not giving you tools for dealing with the shitty things of life, if it's telling you that you have complete control over everything, be careful. If it's not giving you support to feel more validated, loved, and accepted in who you are, and then empowered to make choices because you're coming from a place of loving and accepting yourself, not from a place of trying to fix your broken self, but of trying to support the you that actually exists, be wary of it. And if it leads you to feeling like it's okay to blame, shame, and guilt yourself, or to blame, shame, and guilt anyone else, be careful of it. Okay? This is what we need this time of year. A reminder that we are all doing our best. You are doing your best. You are enough. If in 2024 all you did was choose to say, I'm going to come from a place of trying to support myself versus trying to fix myself. I want to show up for the me that actually exists, and rather than having blame, shame, and guilt about it, I want to actually understand why I am the way that I am, and then what I need to feel supported in the reality that actually exists, where I have control and where I don't. You won't have a hangover in February, because that's a thing we can actually maintain. Okay? So are there any questions before we wrap up this special holiday episode? Because if not, I just want to leave you with, you are good enough. You are doing enough. You have a good reason for being where you are. Don't let the world shame you into thinking you don't have anything, because you're not perfect. Start with yourself. Start to learn how to be that safe place for yourself. You will start to learn how to be that safe place for others. We will do this together. Okay? All right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being yourself. I'll see you in the new year. One step at a time. How can you support you? The you that actually exists, versus trying to fix you, thinking there's something wrong with you, because there isn't. Okay. Have a good holiday season, and I'll see you in the new year.